Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in right now. I'm about to get you totally engaged, totally enthralled by what I'm about to say. But first of all, we have to introduce what the podcast is. It's a universal discourse. Do it just for you. Universal discourse. You know we do what we like to do. I liked that. That was cool. That was somewhat original. I tried to mix it up a bit and not mention the word poo. The name's Benjamin Cleve Ganong here, reporting from Fredericton, New Brunswick. Shout out to all our listeners out there. We actually have a live audience with us tonight. Welcome Albert, everyone, please, who's listening. Yeah, I like Universal Discourse. Yeah, go Ben. Wow, that was overwhelmingly motivational. Thank you, Albert. We'll be checking in with Albert from time to time throughout the show. But I thought that I better introduce to you what this episode's going to be about. This episode's going to be about my story in particular. I'm going to focus on the addiction side of my story. But essentially, I'm going to backtrack and give you a bit of a memoir of my life before alcohol and then when alcohol came into the picture, and then after I got rid of that bad boy, because it was just, it was consuming my life, destroying it, taking it down brick by brick, and it just had to go. Here we go. Hope you enjoy, people, and love ya. Okay. There's addiction on both sides of my family. On my dad's side and my mom's side, which I guess is both sides. I'm not going to get into that part of the story too deeply. I'm not sure. I haven't really asked my mom or my dad how much I can divulge as far as that information goes, but I will just leave it at that alcoholism and mental illness is very much alive on both sides of my family, which gives the hereditary component a certain level of merit. When I was born, I don't remember much. I really don't remember anything until I was about 2 years old. But when I was born, I peed on my mom's sock immediately. So it was a pretty key indicator to tell, like, oh, this boy's going to be a handful. He peed on my sock as soon as he came out of the womb. It should have been a sign to perhaps put me up for adoption. My sister did say that I was adopted at times during my childhood, but it's not true. So thank you to my parents. Shout out to them for not putting me up for adoption. I had a really great childhood, to be honest. Not a lot of trauma. So I can't really blame my alcoholism on bad parenting or not having a home. Not a lot of traumatic stories as far as that goes. Both parents were very loving towards me. Certainly, you take on some of your parents' traits. I take on some of their positive ones, some of their negative ones. No one's perfect. So I really can't. There's no blame. Not playing the blame game there. This is all on me, and I have to take responsibility for my actions. And I think, sometimes that's what I've done since I've been sober. But my dad pretty much signed me up for whatever I wanted to do. He didn't push me into any sports. He sort of let me pick and choose what I wanted. I ended up being in soccer and volleyball and basketball, and thrived in those three areas. I'm a pretty good athlete, and as a result of that, I kept going with sports all the way up until this day, really. So that was definitely a positive thing in my life growing up. My dad would come to each and every one of my games. Later on in my life, sometimes I'd be a little self-conscious and worry about what he'd think of me when I was on the volleyball court or whatever, and he just wanted to enjoy the show. He always told me that it was like getting front row tickets to see the Raptors, to see me play sports or see me play basketball. I really appreciated that. So my dad was very supportive in that respect. My mom would come here and there. She definitely didn't have that so much in common as far as being passionate about sports, but she was always there in other ways, being an affectionate and kind and caring mother. So I was pretty much able to do whatever I wanted to within the realm of school sports. I remember I was really excited going into middle school, knowing that I'd be able to play for the school. because in elementary school, all they had, at least at the one that I was going to, was cross country, things like that. So I was super pumped when I got to middle school and was able to play for my school. Represent Nashwauk Sis Middle School, what up? I had a beautiful, beautiful time, like very fond memories of my experiences in sports, really all the way up until grade 8, when I had a coach. We won't get into what his name was or anything like that, but he coached me in basketball, and I remember in grade 7 knowing that I was good enough to be able to play for varsity, but also being fearful because I saw the way he coached on the floor, and he was a screamer. And he didn't yell in the sense that he was trying to motivate you. He yelled at you when you did something wrong, and so he was always bringing you down, not really motivating, like, come on, get back on defense, guard that man with a huge fro, or guard the guy with the long hair, whatever. Oh, God, motivating you to work harder on defense. Those are weird examples. He was just always very punitive. I remember practices where I wouldn't get drills or I wouldn't understand plays as quickly as some of the other boys sometimes. And that was a way of beating myself up. But to go on top of that, the coach would scream at me and make me feel really stupid. And so that went on for 5 months or so. I think sometimes the reason why I wouldn't really understand the plays as quickly as the other boys is because I had social anxiety, and I always sort of focused on the fact that, oh God, if I do something wrong, this guy's going to scream at me, and he's going to make me feel ridiculous in front of all the other guys, and in turn, they're going to look at me as if I'm stupid, and then that'll just... Anyways, so I just ended up focusing on the anxiety that I was worried about feeling at that time, and as a result, I didn't quite focus on what the coach was saying, and I wasn't as engaged as I could have been. So throughout that season, there was a lot of ups and downs. Certainly when I did something good, he let me know about it, but that didn't really counteract the times that he had screamed and made me feel less than human. Oh, he made me feel like E.T.'s son, Barnabas. Barnabas, he didn't even get a movie. E.T. got his own movie. Barnabas was E.T.'s son, who was disfigured, well, as disfigured as an alien can be, and I felt like Barnabas sometimes. So coming to the end of the season, the school season had concluded, and I moved into playing Bantam basketball, and we went to Moncton for a tournament. And the tournament was fun up until the last game when our star player was out. And so my coach walks over to my dad and he's like, Bengana, he's going to score 20 points this game. I know it. He's going to score 20 points. My dad was like, all right, Jock. And so I was standing right there. So more pressure was put on my shoulders. And in games, as you can imagine, I was scared to make a mistake. You can't be a basketball player and be scared to make a mistake. NBA players make mistakes. The best three-point shooters in the NBA score like high 40% general, unless you're Steph Curry and low 50%. But NBA basketball players miss over half their shots. So what do you expect? I made mistakes. And so on that final game of that tournament, when he expected me to score 20 points, I was so fearful that I just didn't act. I tried to play it safe, and by playing it safe, I ended up having no impact, ended up scoring little to no points. In the whole game, he was consistently screaming at me. It wasn't like, it was literally, it sounded like his testicles were being squeezed by the Hulk, because his voice would get so high-pitched, what are you doing? I can't even mock what he used to say, because it was just so high-pitched. He would have been an incredible singer. I think if you know the singer Birdie, she does a rendition of Come On, Skinny Love, yeah. He would be an unreal singer in karaoke for that. In fact, I might message him and tell him to do that. But anyways, he would scream at me in that high-pitched voice, and at the end of the game, I was so sad and traumatized at what I had just gone through that I just wanted to cry. But as we know, men do not cry. Men do not show emotion. Men well up all of their emotions until they explode in some awkward, weird way. And so anyways, I shoved it right down there. On our way home, my dad was like, Ben, you know what? You can cry if you want to. I just held those in as if my life depended on it, and ended up quitting the basketball team after that. Part of I was, of course, ashamed of that because I had never quit any team in my life, but I had just had it. I could not face another game or another practice with that particular individual. Now, not to run him down or anything, he's a human being. I'm sure he saw things differently, but from my perspective, he was a butthole. So that was the first time where I can remember being stressed out and very anxious all the time. I remember before games, I looked around and I'd always ask the other boys, "You guys nervous? You guys nervous for this?" Some of them said, "Yeah, a little bit," but no one ever seemed to be quite as nervous as I was. I think he saw this potential in me that he couldn't tap into. He didn't know how to tap into it. And so, as a result, I ended up getting verbally abused more. And I often look back on that now. And, it wasn't for a while that I realized how truly traumatic that situation was, because coaches are put on a pedestal, and we, as kids, we look for their praise. We want to impress them, and when they're constantly running us down, that makes us feel like shit. So if you're a coach, build your kids up, man. And later on, I would have coaches who would yell, but it was a different kind of yelling. It wasn't as destructive, and I could handle that. I could handle. In grade 10, our coach yelled all the time, but it was more like motivation, getting us to work harder, and we loved the guy, so we would. Anyway, moving on, got up into high school. Didn't actually play basketball my first year because this guy moved up to high school. I went out to try out for the team, and I went in there and like, "Oh, Ganong, you're gonna be playing point guard for us." Didn't go back after that tryout. I was like, this is definitely not happening. I'm not going anywhere near that man again. So I ended up playing competitive Reds volleyball instead. I was always confident in volleyball. I always had a natural confidence about myself, especially in high school, that I didn't have in other sports. Going into the game, I knew I was going to own the shit out of that game. Whereas other sports, I always had to kind of prove myself at the start of the game before acquiring the momentum to get better and to feel confident about who I was as a player. It was grade 10 where I had my first beer. Me and a group of my friends were out at a cottage outside Ottawa, and I was under the influence of some marijuana, which I never really quite liked. It always made me way too paranoid, but my friends were doing it, so I was like, you know what, jumping on the wagon. And I was a little bit too high off that to really feel the effects of the couple of beer that I had that night. My friend's grandparents drove us to the liquor store and bought us all 6-packs. I thought they were the coolest grandparents of life. And I think it was what was it, Molson Canadian we had, and each of us just smoked a bit of reefer and had that beer. And I didn't really quite feel it. And a couple of weeks after that, when I was back in Fredericton, another group of my friends, we filled up a book bag full of, it was Labatt Blue this time, and we went to Macadam Avenue Elementary School and hung out in the back there where the playground is, and I started drinking the beer, and I had a different goal this time. I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to figure out what everybody's talking about. I'm going to figure out, like, I'm going to tap into why adults drink so much alcohol all the time. Because God knows at that time I thought it was absolutely disgusting. But that night, I was like, okay, I'm drinking the beer that I have. I'm going to chug it if I have to. And so that's what I did. I ended up chugging Bat Blue. And it was probably, I don't know how many beer in it was, probably not very many, 3, maybe 4. And this buzz came across me. And all of a sudden, Ben Ganong had arrived. All that anxiety, all of that incessant worry, the self-doubt, the self-hatred, that internal destructive hamster wheel that's constantly telling me I'm not enough and comparing me to other people and whatnot, just that, and then fighting depression all the time, all of those factors, and then just feeling like I needed to prove myself all the time. All those things just were washed away immediately, and I just felt like I could tap into who I really was without all of these internal voices speaking to me, telling me that I should be this way or I should be that way, or I'm not enough to be here, or I'm not cool enough to be with this group of people, or I'm not good enough until I achieve this. That just went away. And I could say and do what I wanted without giving a fuck about what other people thought. And that was liberating to me. It was like I had tapped into some spiritual entity that I hadn't experienced before. Like I had tapped into my own spirit, I guess, in a different way. And so that became a spiritual experience of sorts for me through this alcohol substance. And so I found myself running around a soccer field at Macadam Avenue School, just doing circles around this soccer field, looking up, running through the blackness of that night, and just truly living in that moment and enjoying it for everything it was worth. And I think at that time I was like, you know what? Every single chance I get, I'm going to drink beer. And over time I did actually end up acquiring a taste for it. But that's what I did every single weekend that I wasn't at a basketball tournament or wasn't at a soccer or volleyball tournament. Actually, those tournaments became something that I didn't look forward to anymore. They became an obstacle to my partying and drinking life that was about to take off in a whole new way. And it really did. It took over my life. I started to live for the bottle. I started to live for alcohol. That was my reason for going to school. My reason for going to play sports, for putting on a face every day, was just so I could get to the bottle in order to just sweep all of that internal garbage that I had, just that self-loathing that I had stored up inside of me. And so I lived to get to the bottle, to get drunk, just to feel that release. And I really didn't recognize it at the beginning, how much of a hold it had on me. But it became my higher power. It became my God. I started to live for that. It's really, it was very shameful to say that, but looking back on it, I don't carry any shame for it anymore. But it really was. It became my higher power. So every weekend I found a party and I got drunk. And during the week, I would immediately on Monday morning, I can remember writing on my friend's notebook, what's going on next weekend? Like, what are we doing? And they, of course, they enjoyed drinking too, because I definitely started to navigate my way through different groups and finding the people who like to get smashed, who like to get drunk, because I wanted to find a friend group where I felt normal. And at that time I was underage, so it wasn't difficult, or it was more difficult for me to get alcohol. So I wouldn't drink so much where I would get blackout that often. Usually I would just get to a point of getting drunk because I only had so much alcohol. It was also more exciting at that time because you never know where it was going to come from. I mean, obviously there had to be a certain level of fun with it. There had to be that free, exciting, buzz, drunk feeling for a while in order for me to get addicted to it. And it hit me in such a way where it doesn't hit a lot of other people. A lot of other people take a couple of drinks. Oh, I don't know about this, Betsy. Getting a little tipsy there. Don't know if I can really control this anymore, so I better stop. I better have some water. That point never came for me. I got that buzzed feeling, felt that freedom, and just chased it the whole night into oblivion. It was when I was 18. It was grade 12. I had just got back from seeing the Celtics play with my dad, and I was with some friends. I actually wasn't drinking this night. I know, amazing. I was sick. I had a plethora of different symptoms, and so I took everything possible not to feel those symptoms. I took cold and flu medication, so the pills. I took cough syrup, Halls, those little cough drops. I was taking those like they were chiclets. How are you now? And I just started to feel kind of foggy and tired, and said, you know what, guys, I think I'm going to head home now. And so I did. Walked down, laid down on my futon. The last thing I remember seeing was the flashing green clock, because I hadn't set the time. And so I closed my eyelids, and behind my eyelids it just started to flash, kind of like a strobe light. And I was like, what is happening right now? And so I opened my eyes, kind of started to panic a bit, then said, Ben, you need to relax. Like, you need to just relax. And I told this story in episode 5 of the podcast, so I won't get too into it. But essentially, I ended up panicking that night, and I went to the emergency room because I really didn't know. I was shaking. I didn't know what was happening to me. And they ended up wheeling me in, giving me some tranquilizers. And then for the next month, what ended up happening is I ended up acquiring anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, maybe even a bit of agoraphobia, because I spent 5 months inside my house. And this mental illness had come into my life and destroyed everything that I had constructed that told me what reality was. And so my reality became completely different, one riddled with fear. I always felt this compressed butterfly type feeling in the center of my chest, as if I was about to give a speech to the entire country of Canada. That never went away. I actually dreaded going to sleep at night because it would take me so long to actually get to sleep. And then the next morning when I'd wake up into this hell. And I knew that I just had to lay there in that house watching Oprah and Dr. Phil 5,000 times over again just to get my mind off my own mind. I had to sleep with my dad in his bed because I couldn't be away from him. It was a nightmare. You can imagine that I beat myself up for that. Finally, 5 months in, I figured out that it was an anxiety disorder. I had every check you can possibly imagine because I thought it was cancer. I just didn't think anxiety could tear open your life like that and just completely change your whole conception of reality. So finally I ended up taking medication, did some therapy, and medication hit me, and it really, for me, it was a miracle because I went from a place of not being able to function whatsoever. I went from a place of thinking that I was about to go crazy every second of every day, that I was going to hallucinate, that something terrible was about to happen to me. Just completely irrational thoughts that you would never, unless you've experienced that kind of mental illness, you just can't understand how much of a hell or a prison or a cage it is to be trapped in your own body and to not understand how to get out of that place. And finally 5 months came up, and it was a miracle for me. And I was able to go into university that fall. And I did, and I'd fallen in love with a girl at that time. And she broke up with me after about 8 months. And I went just crazy because I thought she was the love of my life, and it was just over. And as the listeners, you can imagine, listeners out there, how are you now? Things are getting serious up in here. So I fell in love with this girl, and I thought that my life was over. I thought we were going to get married, have kids, have a dog named Susan who would shed all over the house, and then we could make parkas out of it. But that never happened. And she broke up with me, and it just seemed like a non-thing for her. And for me, it was like my walls were falling all around me. So it was definitely a period of growth, I suppose. I dropped out of university, began drinking even more, probably 4 nights a week, going out every chance that I could. All of my paychecks were gone, usually within 2 to 4 days. And then I'd eat peanut butter sandwiches, and of course I was living at my dad's house at the time, so I didn't have rent, I didn't pay for a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone until I was 25 years old. Boom! Your mind just exploded. Hopefully not. I'd probably have some lawsuits on my hands. The 2 listeners in Minto, New Brunswick's minds just were obliterated today after listening to Universal Discourse. Those are our 2 listeners, Wendy and Leonard in Minto. Shout out to you! You know what I do say a lot, folks? This might annoy you now, but I say a lot. I've kind of gotten rid of but I'm trying to get rid of Anyways, back to the story. So I continued to drink 4 nights a week. Finally went back to university. Cruised through my university degree. Guess I didn't cruise. It's 4 years. But for a BA, I could drink like a fish and still get away with it. Still get my papers done. It wasn't a really rigorous degree. Well, I mean, it was definitely challenging, but I could still get drunk and get decent marks. That's what I'm trying to convey. So when the 4 years were up, that was also the ending of another relationship that I had after that first one. It was a 4-year relationship. this one, I definitely cared about the girl deeply, but I think that I got into a relationship with her because I had no deep, deep feelings of love for this woman. So in a way, I think that it was protecting. I was protecting myself. But yeah, just not a cool guy in that relationship. Obviously, I was an alcoholic at the time, but didn't recognize it, and as a result, not the coolest dude. So after we broke up, I went out west because I wanted to expand my horizons. I didn't want to be that guy who's like, yep, been in Fredericton me whole life. One time I went out to Skinny's by Mark the Quack and had one of their ice creams and pet one of their peacocks. I just didn't want to be that guy. So I moved out to Vancouver and worked there for half a year doing some construction. I'm kind of like a chameleon. I mean, I can really fit in anywhere, I suppose, but my personality just didn't vibe with it. Yeah, last night I beat up a guy and did some really hard drugs, and I've been to prison once. I mean, not that people have their hardships. I understand that, but I can't really relate to that. I don't beat people up, and I've never been to prison, so that's a good thing. Could have been, but I was not. I did not end up going that route. Luckily, thank God. So I went to Vancouver, was there for like 6 months. Then I went to Calgary to be closer to my sister. Was not in a good way. This is really when my alcoholism started to come full frontal nudity. All right, so my alcoholism just started to rise up, and I started to consume my life, and I was just looking left and right, trying to blame everything on something else besides me and the way that I was drinking alcohol to deal with my emotions or my mental state. And that really wasn't working. I just really honestly didn't know how to live. I thought that everybody else had gotten this manual. Here's this manual, young man, on how to live life. Pay your bills, go to work every day, and eat food. I just didn't get that manual, and I thought everyone else did. So I really didn't know how to live. It was a total mess. In Calgary, I had 3 jobs. I I got sober there for 8 months because my dad had to come home from China because the police had brought me home a few times because I was so intoxicated. I was not aware of my own name. So they brought me home to my sister's place, and my dad had to come home because my sister was, of course, all up in arms about what I was doing, which was being a total sick mess of an alcoholic. And then the police said to my sister, listen, if he has another beer, you can call us. We'll come right to your house and we will take him to the police station. So after that, my dad came home and I decided to get sober. He took me to the hospital and we were going to blame it on the medication. Like, oh, I got a problem with that medication, man. That's giving me cravings for alcohol. Yep, that's definitely what it is. And then finally it just spewed out of me like a bunch of diarrhea. I was like, I have a problem with alcohol. And she's like, okay. And they gave me a bunch of pamphlets on AA and on a cognitive behavioral therapy program, all these different outlets. And I thought they needed to literally keep me in a psych ward because I just couldn't trust my own mind. I just wanted alcohol and I was going to go for it. I didn't know how to live life without it. I was like, really? They're just going to set me loose out there and on the people of Calgary? Random story in Vancouver. I used to run by this really large, beautiful castle of a White House. And I was like, man, I'd love to take a tour of that place. Anyways, one night I had one too many alcoholic beverages. I know, surprising, right? And I wandered into this house. I don't really remember it. I remember it like bits and pieces. And I wandered into this large white house. And I went into their cabinet and took a can of Stag chili and then put it in my pocket and then proceeded to lay down on their couch. And the owner of their house apparently came to the top of his stairs and was like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm tired. And so I laid down on the couch. And of course, he called the police, got brought home in handcuffs. And my two Chinese landlords, they're like, you'll not drink so much. Actually, that sounded kind of Pakistani. They were like, you'll not drink so much. Oh, that was terrible as well, but in a Chinese accent. And they were beautiful people. But yeah, they said, you not drink so much. And I was like, oh, okay. So obviously I didn't take their advice. But back to Calgary. I ended up moving in with this girl, of course. And ended up living with her family, and that became a stress unto itself. And I was like 8 months, 17 days sober, just white knuckling it, not putting the work in. And as a result of that, I ended up downtown Calgary, and I knew that I had decided to drink. There was nothing I could do. I felt like my mind had been made up, and no matter what was going to happen in my life, I was going to drink for that. I was going to drink. I was going to reach for that beer, and I was going to drink it. And so I just sat there in the mall downtown, awaiting the inevitable. I knew that I would go get drunk. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's going to be just this one time. Just this one time, Ben. I'll be the quintessential one-time drunk alcoholic, and then I will go back to being sober. And, of course, that's not really that unique. A lot of alcoholics think that before going on massive benders. It's just like an excuse to allow me to go and get drunk and see where it goes. And that's what happened. That started a 4-month relapse. Eventually, I was an absolute mess, was doing things that I just didn't think I was ever capable of. One time I got brought home because I'd broken into this building, and the police couldn't understand how I broke into it, and they tried to interrogate me and ask me how I broke into this building and ended up in the fetal position there. I didn't steal anything. I was just cold because I was running around in 40 degree below zero weather with only a t-shirt on. And I said, I have no idea. Like, I can't even remember. Something about the cops showing up for some reason took me out of a blackout state. Maybe it was just the shock of that authority figure. Oh God, it's the bad boys. It's Will Smith and whatever that other guy's name is. Sorry, Martin something. Martin Lawrence. There we go. Oh, boom. Brain worked. But something about the shock of police officers showing up that kind of took me out of that blackout. So anyways, they took me home and whatever. But getting back to drinking, I began to relapse consistently, and like I said, things got so bad out in Calgary that I called my mom. I think I actually sent her a text message. Can't remember. Probably the text message. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm coming home. I'll hitchhike home if I have to. And she said, okay, well, I'll buy you a flight ticket. Because I had gotten kicked out of my girlfriend's house, which was for the best, because I had totally taken advantage of their kindness. And I was a mess. So I came home. I was terrified to come back to Fredericton because a lot of my drinking friends were here who kind of made me feel normal. I actually went out west initially. I was like, okay, I'm going to get away from my friends that are here because they're the ones who are making me drink. If I could just get away from them, I'd be perfect. And of course, play the tape forward, and the problem lied within Ben's gray matter, within his cognizance, the brain that is within my skull. So I came home, and of course I continued to relapse. Sometimes I'd be downtown and I'd hide in a snowbank, or one time I bought a Colt 45 and I hid in one of the latrines in one of those Ready Johns, those big blue outhouses, and I just sat in there in the middle of winter and drank this, just trying to escape the shit show that my life had become. And the worse and worse it got, and the more that I just totally hated myself and didn't want to live, the more I tried to escape. And I'd do anything to escape. Not anything, but pretty well. Anyways, long story short, my mom and dad were going to leave Fredericton. My mom was going to go down south and my dad was going to go out west, and that was my chance for a last moment of glory. I was going to party, I was going to be the man, I was going to go out and dance, and I was going to have the most fantastic time of my entire life. So I bought a quart and I hid it in a snowbank close to my house. And when they left, of course, I went out to the snowbank, grabbed the quart, grabbed a 2-liter of Pepsi, and that started a 5-day stint of horribleness. That I'm not sure if that's a word. I think it is now because I created it. Horribleness. Where every single day bled together because I just consistently drank over those 5 days. During those 5 days, I don't know what happened. I ended up getting punched in the face 5 times because I went to this apartment building and entered this guy's apartment in the middle of the day who I had no idea who he was. I just thought that a friend of mine had lived in this apartment, which he did, but I walked in to a door that was ajar, and I just walked in there, and this guy did not look very happy. He was white as a ghost and he seemed on edge. And I started mocking him, of course, because I was obnoxious and rude at that time. Because at that point, I was so much of a failure in my own mind because I continued to go back to alcohol. I was a slave to alcohol. It was like my lord. It ruled me and it ruled my life and it told me what to do. And something about that is terrifying. It was like I was looking at myself from a third person perspective. Almost like, who is this person? I've watched myself do things and I had no power over myself at all because the addiction had become so strong. And that terrified me because I never knew what I was going to do. And so this guy jumps on top of me after I mock him for a while and punches me. And I go back home and I ended up in the drunk tank 3 times that week, just getting to the point where I didn't know who I was. I got in trouble with the law. And so finally I was in the drunk tank and they let me out. And they gave me my red sweater because they take a lot of your things because they think that you might hang yourself with it. So rightly so, because I was at that point where I didn't know how to live. I didn't want to live, but I wouldn't kill myself. And I just didn't know what to do because up until that point, I didn't know how to get rid of alcohol from my life. How do I get rid of this thing that I live for? That I just, like I said, like I need a different roadmap to life, not Ben Ganong's, because that one was fucked. So my dad shows up. The police officer's like, hey, like, your dad's here. Dad flew back from Victoria. He heard what was going on. He heard that the police had broken into my house and taken me up to get evaluated by the psychiatrist to see if I was suicidal. And I told them I didn't have a plan. So then they just shipped me off down to the drunk tank again. So anyways, I just sat in my dad's car after he picked me up with my hood up over my head. And I looked at him and he looked at me and I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I started crying, just overwhelmed with emotion and shame, because this is who his son had become. And I just looked up to my dad so much, and my mom, like, and my sister. They all have always had my back, and this, like, I always had an idea of who Ben Ganong was going to be, and the person who I saw in the mirror, the person who I felt I was in that moment, was such a shameful, horrible, horrendous human being that I just burst into tears. And I think that in a way I had surrendered on that day to the fact that Ben Ganong doesn't know what he's doing, and he needs to tear himself open and be willing to take suggestions from other people and to do difficult things and to learn how to live this life without running to the bottle every time things get tough. So during that first week, I just felt like I followed my dad around, and he just kind of told me what to do because I had no will. There was no drive for me to do anything, but I would do anything for him because there's something about that with my dad. Like, anyway, he would take me to AA meetings, and I finally got a sponsor, someone who would help me through the steps of AA. There's 12 steps in 12 step groups, and just meeting with another alcoholic and being able to talk about the difficulties that I was having in meetings and in group session, things like that, and starting to go through the big book, which is the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started to read about who I was and what I was doing and how I dealt with life, and to realize that the way that I was doing things, as I said, was not working, and that I had to look at this program of life that AA offers, because it's not a program about how to stop drinking, not by any means. It's a program on how to live, because we don't, like, obviously our plan is not working, so we need to take this program of AA and start building our life up piece by piece, acquiring different values, principles, reacting to things in different ways, learning to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, and then learning to apologize and look at our side of the story. AA gave me so much. It really saved my life. It gave me a higher power, whom I choose to call God, because Tony or Tim just doesn't really vibe well with me. And my all-encompassing power of the universe is just that. It's like an energy of the universe that governs all things. And when I pray to that and I plug into it, I feel a strength that I don't feel when I'm not actively seeking spiritual life, because to me God is an action word. And by the way, these are just my opinions. So if anything doesn't serve you, or if anything doesn't coincide with the big book when I'm talking about it, just ignore what I'm saying. But I have to do the action. That's one of the main, most important lessons that I learned in recovery, is that nothing happens if you don't do anything. You can't sit there and pray to God that something's going to change, that you're going to change. You can't think your way out of something with a sick mind. You can't. You need help. You need to go out there and seek help, take different actions, even when it's uncomfortable. You need to take suggestions, read. I began meditating and praying and exercising on a daily basis. Yoga came into my life right around this time. Actually, I started doing yoga in December, which was a couple of months before I got sober. My sober date is February 25th, 2015, so it'll be coming up on 4 years now. Yoga was such a powerful tool for me, because not only was it a physical practice where I could let go of a lot of the tension and stress in my body, in the fascia of my tissue, but I could also get out that nervous, anxious energy that drove me to drink a lot of the time, and then open myself up to have a more relaxed meditation at the end of practice. I mean, yoga unto itself is a moving meditation, but when you get into Shavasana, then there's no more, you're not getting physical in your body. So there's no more physical uncomfortability to focus on. You're just focusing on your own mind, your thought processes, and trying to focus on a number of different of goals. Like, there's different ways to meditate. I'm not going to get into that. But yoga became a platform for that for me. And I'm such a physical person. I desire that release, those endorphins, the serotonin, dopamine release that comes from doing physical exercise. The more rigorous, obviously, the better for me, because you get more of a release. But I mean, moderation is important too. So I got into yoga more heavily, and running and weight training, things like that. Started going to meetings on a daily basis early on. I was going to a meeting every single day. I went to at least 90 meetings in 90 days. It was probably more like 120 meetings in 90 days. And I was going to early recovery meetings. I was seeing a counselor, meeting with my sponsor, reading self-help books, reading the big book, doing everything that I possibly could to get a handle on this, and not giving my brain even a moment to dwell in pessimism and negativity, because I knew that would bring me back to the drink, and it would get me back into that groove where I felt stuck, like I couldn't move, and I'd go back to the bottle. So I didn't even give myself a chance to focus on that. I just started filling my mind. There's something to be said about the input, the media input, the music, the television that you watch. It all, as much as we'd like to think that we're not prone to thinking negative as a result of these inputs, we're human beings. What we put in is extremely important. And that goes for food, that goes for friends, the people you surround yourself with. They become a huge part of who you are. Because as human beings, this is going to sound kind of weird, but we need a tribe. We need a group that we feel like we belong to. And if we're surrounding ourselves with negative people who are constantly talking about destructive things that are only going to bring us down, then we're going to buy into that, because we want to feel like we're a part of the group. We're going to end up molding ourselves to fit in to what this group's all about. So it was so important for me to slowly start surrounding myself with people who are going to lift me up, who believed in me, who would tell me that what I said was bullshit, or the way that I was treating myself or talking to myself was not the proper way. So, and I used to always think that a pessimistic way of thinking, I guess some people like to call themselves realists, but to me, if you're being negative and you're being a realist all the time, there's no benefit to that. Why not think extravagantly? Why not think positively? I mean, it's only when I'm actively, keyword active, actively trying to live in a positive manner, I, in turn, things just start working out better for me. I deal with confrontations better. I deal with stress better because that's just the frame of mind. I look at those challenges as something, an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity. It's almost like a test. Whereas if I have a pessimistic mind frame, I'm like, oh, there's God again, putting that old magnifying glass on me as if I'm some sort of ant, and he's up there actively trying to make me miserable. Like I have like this dark cloud over my head. But so I just started living in a different way, and in some self help books, sometimes I'll get caught up in the frame of mind that, okay, yes, that's a good way to do that, but how exactly do I do it? Like, how do I give me a roadmap on how to apply that in my own life? For an example, a lot of successful people have a really strong morning routine. They'll get up, they'll meditate, they'll make breakfast, they'll make the time to pray, they'll jot down a to-do list. And I was like, hey, well, how do I get motivated to do this? Like, please teach me. But the sobering answer to that is that there is no roadmap to do it. There is no easy way to integrate yourself into those habits. You just have to do them. You have to do them. You have to, because motivation, for me at least, only really comes after I start doing something. It's like going to the gym. Before you start going to the gym again, you're not going to feel motivated. Oh yeah, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to rock out those weights. I'm going to sweat like a British mule, and I'm going to become the skinniest, most ripped man alive. That doesn't happen until you start going to the gym. You start seeing some results and see yourself changing in a positive way. Then the motivation starts to kick in. So it's just about starting, even if it's baby steps, to motivate. For me, that's what I had to do in a variety of different things. I just would start. And then from there, once I got, say I'm writing, once I get a few words jotted down, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I get a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration from that. I'm like, okay, well, I actually started. And then I'll just dive into it, and I'll get locked in. The hardest part is just starting. So that's a bit of my recovery journey. After I recovered that, not recovered, but after I began recovering that first year, because I'm always recovering, I'm never fully recovered. If I think I'm fully recovered, then there's going to be an issue, because then I'll probably rest on my laurels and think that everything that I did yesterday is going to apply to today as well, and I'll keep that going, and then eventually I'll find myself in my room, a prison to my own mind, which has happened on occasion. It still does. I'm not perfect. Sometimes I still bring myself down to that point where I ask myself the question, what is the point? And the thing about it is there is no real answer to that question. We don't really know what the point of life is. So we have to make our own point. We have to make our own reason. We have to plug into commitments and get ourselves uncomfortable and start, we have to have faith. And once we adopt those beliefs, principles, values, passions, we can create our own point to this life. For me, it's not really that beneficial for me to ask myself those questions that really have no answer. I just got to get up every day and look at it as a 24-hour period and do my best throughout that 24 hours to get shit done and to feel good about myself after, because I know that tomorrow morning it's going to be a lot easier for me to get up if today I lived fully and I was the best version of myself. I've been able to do a lot of wonderful things in sobriety. Definitely it's been a rocky road, and I'm still trying to get a little bit more consistent with what I'm vibing with, at least on a positive level. But I've been able to get a degree in education. I've gone overseas for a year. That was a bit of a mess, but I survived it, didn't pick up a drink, learned a lot of great lessons over there. Especially, number one, I learned to practice a lot more gratitude when I'm here in Canada, because our streets, our buses, they're not a huge orgy of people just fighting for a little bit of a space. God bless the Chinese and Thai people, because what they go through on a daily basis is they have to fight for everything. There's no casual stroll down the street. There's hawking and spitting and horns honking and people rushing in front of you and butting you in line, and it's just people just trying to survive over there and trying to make a decent life. And and then you come back here and the air's clean. That was a big thing, as I didn't really quite understand how polluted it was over there. So I went over there and then came back here, and then I had both sides of the coin again. And then I was able to drink tap water again. That was that was a revolution. I've been able to run some pretty, like I've been able to run a marathon and been able to run an ultra marathon. My first one I did last spring. I've been able to create some amazing friendships that are built on real, honest love rather than, "You getting drunk tonight, Betty? Ah, yeah, let's get out there to the old pub there and see how drunk we can get and throw some beer. Let's do some beer pong there, and then eventually after 40 beer, I might get out on my dance floor and dance. Now I can get on the dance floor and dance sober and act like a total fool." I was actually at a dance the other night with a bunch of recovery people, and I was out there, I don't know, waggling around and whatever. People who are listening to this who are my friends, you know what I'm talking about. And I was like, yeah, probably some recovering people who are sitting down here probably think I relapsed because I was just dancing that outrageously. But I'm so very grateful that I'm here now and I'm able to at least make some sort of an impact on the world and do my best on a day-to-day basis. Because when I have these unrealistic expectations of myself, and I hold myself I hold myself up to a point like where I can't possibly reach, then I remember that, oh Ben, like you were almost homeless, you almost died, and now you get all of this time to live a life, to live any life, because I'm no longer ruled by the almighty alcoholic bottle. I don't know why why I got to the point where I was willing to change and stop drinking. I know that I hit my own personal bottom, but I also know that a lot of addicts continually hit bottom and they never get better. So I think that that's just the grace of God and a willingness to do the work. And undoubtedly because I have a loving family who never really gave up on me. And that was key. There was one time where I had lied to my mom and I told her that I was hanging out with a friend that night, and I can't remember exactly what I told her, but I ended up going out and reaching for my drug of choice, which was alcohol, of course, and staying at a friend's house that night, just like knocking on his door at midnight, and he let me, to his credit, a very kind person, he let me stay on his couch that night. And then I had thought that my mom would kick me out because I lied to her again. And she showed up at his doorstep and said, "Where's my son?" And my friend told me, "Oh, he's in here." And my mom's like, "Well, he's my responsibility. I'm taking him home." And so they just loved me until I was willing to change, which God knows I can be very stubborn. I can be a self-centered, selfish person. Actually, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that that's the root of our disease, is that we are selfish and self-centered, and we have to learn to care for others and to think about other human beings in order for recovery to happen. And so it's been a process. I'm still learning, can still be self-centered at times, but I'm back into a growth mindset now, trying to do my best, trying to record this and hopefully help some other people in what they're struggling with, and perhaps give them some hope that they can do it too. Because I remember when I first came in, I just thought that anybody who had a year of sobriety was like Jesus. I just didn't understand how anybody could stay sober that long. And now that I'm almost at 4 years, it's a miracle to me. And all I can do is continue to come back of a place of being humble and understanding that I don't control this, and I gotta surrender. Take this one day at a time, try to throw as much love out there as I can, and not put too much pressure on old Ben Ganong. I hope you enjoyed my story, folks. It was definitely there it goes. It was definitely the short version. So I hope you really enjoyed it. Like I said, so value your time and your listening abilities. I hope you guys go out there and try to throw some love out into the world as much as you can, because really, what else do we have in this life but to help other people? Somebody said that to me the other day, and I was like, that's so true. Like, sure, we're all chasing money and whatnot, but you can't take that to the grave with you, and it's just other people. What can you do for other people to limit their suffering, to ease their suffering? You can just offer love and do our best to help them out. Okay, this is Universal Discourse. Ben Ganong doing a solo episode. Y'all have a wonderful week. And Ben Ganong out. Universal Discourse. We're having a real good time. Universal Discourse. What a wonderful word to rhyme.